have utilized your Twitter platforms to update the world on what we're doing here. Remember to go to hashtag #SANBio. That is how we will also be able to ask our questions. We will go to our Twitter platform and we'll be able to beam those questions. So in the next session that we're having, we will not come to you for you to ask questions, but please just go to your Twitter platforms, ask your questions, then we will have our facilitators respond to them after they read them on our screen. Ladies and gentlemen, coming up next is Ms. Päivi Lehtonen. She is coming from the Ministry for Foreign Affairs for Finland. The Finnish government will give us reflections on the support that they have given on African innovations in health and nutrition over the past 10 years. I will just give her just a minute to prepare before I get to introduce her, and just also to allow for other delegates to come into the auditorium. I must mention also, ladies and gentlemen, that we have the pitching session in Emerald Auditorium that is taking place. And feel free, if you would like to step there and just have a feel of what is happening in the mandatory pitch training and the introduction of the various pitches that are going on. I must also mention, ladies and gentlemen, that what will happen after the facilitating is that like I said, you will ask your questions using the Twitter platform. But in case you want to have a follow-up and you want to ask the participants more questions, you need some clarifications, feel free to follow the speakers. They will be heading upstairs after their presentation, so you can have a one-on-one with them. I know somebody was just telling me, Nawalia, networking is very important. And I kind of understand that it could have felt as if the time was short, but trust me, the main call of this program is also to network as much as possible. So that opportunity will be given to you. So after the speakers have, given their presentations, feel free to follow them up and be able to chat with them. With that said, for the next 10 minutes, I'd like to draw your attention to Ms. Päivi Lehtonen, who will give us reflections on the Finnish government's support on African innovations in health and nutrition over the past 10 years. Let's welcome her, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation to speak about the reflections on Finland's support on African innovations in health and nutrition over the past 10 years. The Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland, with the Department of Science and Technology of South Africa, have together supported the Biofisa program since 2009. The first phase was for 4 years until 2012 and was mainly to support building the SANBio network. This was the first time Finland and South Africa funded a third party together in a trilateral cooperation. This was also the first time Finland supported biosciences anywhere in the world. The total allocated funding from the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs to the Biofisa program has been close to 10 million euro. The first phase of the Biofisa program was considered successful by an external evaluator in terms of having supported NEPAD in the actual setting up of the SANBio network and strengthening the capacity of the SANBio secretariat as well as the capacity of the nodes. Some pilot projects were financed to develop regional research collaboration, and this was all great. However, two critical bottlenecks were identified after the first phase. First, private sector was not involved, and hence research was not really benefiting anyone except for the researchers. Second, the SANBio secretariat was not sustainable and had remained dependent on donor funding. a decision was made to continue funding for another 4 years and make sure these bottlenecks are addressed. The second phase started only in 2015 after extensive consultations with relevant stakeholders. The current phase has been focused on commercializing research and strengthening SANBio's ownership. Priority areas of the BioFISA 2 program have been animal and human health, as well as nutrition. One tangible and maybe the most exciting part of the program has been the project support. We launched calls for proposals and started supporting regional research projects which had potential to commercialize in the future. I'm very proud to have seen the development of some of these projects and for them to mature to a stage where they can survive on their own. Most of the projects have been successful one way or the other. The business people tend to say that you have only failed if you have not learned anything in the process. BioFISA program has funded 14 projects altogether, and the projects have received incubation and capacity building services in order to grow their businesses and bring their research products and services to the market. Another tangible product of the BioFISA program has been the FemBioBiz Acceleration Program that Zui presented already. It has successfully created demand for female entrepreneurship in biosciences in the Southern African region, while strengthening female participation and capabilities in the biosciences sector in Africa. Last year and the year before, the winners of the FemBioBiz competition in Africa have received a ticket to Slush. Slush is the biggest startup event in the world and is attracting tens of thousands of participants to Helsinki every year. It is facilitating collaboration and networking between startup companies and financiers. Last year, one of the FemBioBiz winners came second in the overall Slush pitching competition and received a prize of €5,000. Finland's Development Cooperation support to, did you want to clap for her? She's here. Finland's Development Cooperation support to BioFISA program will finish by the end of June this year, and hence it's been a good time to reflect how SANBio and the projects we have supported have evolved. I have also been very happy to hear that there will be an entity continuing the FemBioBiz, which has been such a great driver for improving the female capacity and ownership in the biosciences sector in Africa. I thank you and wish you fruitful discussions in this last annual event, but I would like to show you a video if someone can help me. This is from Finland, or can I do it myself? No. Yes, super, thank you.
Healthcare, one of the last bastions of the analog world, is being overrun by the digital revolution. Artificial intelligence and personal health monitoring are transforming the way illnesses are diagnosed. Finland is at the forefront of this revolution, rethinking healthcare and pushing innovations. But why Finland? How did a small country like us become a global leader in digital health? Well, it's literally in our genes. Not only are we creative and full of ideas, but we have a unique and isolated gene pool. 98% of our patient records are in electronic format, and 10% of the Finnish population will soon be genotyped. Combine these pretty unique facts with a legislation that gives access to health data, a government that is pro-business, a bunch of world-class technology companies, and great things are bound to happen. No wonder GE Healthcare has large operations in Finland.
Patients recover better if they can walk around rather than being tied to a bed. And the reason why they're tied to a bed is because there are no mobile monitoring solutions that will go with them to wherever they want to go. And that's one of the key areas that we want to resolve first.
Another Another interesting new service is FIMIC's web microscope that uses deep learning artificial intelligence to speed up research and clinical work.
Web microscope provides fast and easy access to AI-powered image analysis support for the pathologists. For the first time, machine is able to mimic the human observer and act as a second opinion for the pathologist.
That should give you some new perspectives. So why Finland? We have the world's best ecosystem for health research and development, world-class professionals and technology companies, access to health data, and a government set to back new business ventures. We believe in world-changing ideas and turning them into global success stories. Finland works for us. Now let it work for you. Business Finland. World ideas.
Thank you very much. In the next session, we focus on the success and failures in commercializing research, from spin offset and startups to commercial partnerships. And our facilitator for that particular session is Dr. Victor Conde, who is from AEH Global and UNECA. Just a brief profile. Victor Conde is a scientific affairs officer with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He is the founder of the African Technology Development Forum and managing partner of the ATDF Hub in Zambia. He has over 25 years experience in innovation and is currently engaged in the promotion of innovation and entrepreneurship policies and strategies, intellectual asset management, technology transfer, and innovative funding models. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Victor Conde. Let's encourage him again.
Thank you very much. Maybe instead of me reading out names, can I just have my panel here, please? It's much faster than... Okay, I need a few more chairs. Okay, having sorted out the seating arrangements, I was told that there will be 7. Now I see I have more than 7. So, and we have about an hour to go through a whole range of issues. Majority of them will be sharing their own experience in terms of, okay, am I losing some people already? Oh, I love you on my panel. Anyway, so they'll be giving you some of their own personal experiences in trying to get their products to market, which is the issue everyone has been talking about. It isn't a simple thing. It's very complicated. Well, all of us have tried to run something once upon a time, right? I don't know whether you are trying to sell groundnuts by the roadside or maybe some tea to your friends in college, whatever you did, you found out soon that it's not easy to sustain your business to run throughout. Maybe the 4 years you were in college, you did it for maybe a couple of times and someone else took over your market and you gave up. Most of our colleagues are from universities and research institutions and maybe from the private sector. So what I'll do is I'll give each one of them maybe like 30 seconds to just say who they are. I heard someone read out mine. That sounded overwhelming, just hearing for myself. So if you can say who you are, where you're coming from, and that will at least to give us just some ideas on who is in the panel. Can we start from the far end? There's the mic.
Hello, and good morning. I think it's your morning. My name is David Katerere. So I'm at Swane University of Technology, and I'm also a director of a startup from the university that's called Nutricon.
Good morning. My name is Avril Harvey. I work for a company called Parseval. So I'm in the private sector. We developed a herbal tea product through the Biofisa 2 program, which we are launching through a division called African Infusions. And basically, I'd like to say that you're always a startup when you're commercializing. Even if your company is 25 years old, you're constantly growing and expanding.
My name is Mishka Fraser. I'm from Inkaba Biotech. I'm part of a consortium of individuals that developed a forensic genotyping kit.
Good morning. My name is Nomsa Dlamini. I'm from the CSIR. I'm part of the consortium that developed NutriDrink that our CEO was showing off. So my work is basically to develop food products, work with SMMEs, and commercialize. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ivan Poff. I am from Chino University of Technology, and I led a team that managed to commercialize a vitamin mineral supplementation products for livestock using through our commercial partner Capta Foods, who are with us today. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Petniko Dlamini. I'm from Eswatini. I work for the University of Eswatini. I'm in the Department of Animal Science. I'm also involved in postgraduate studies there. We're working on a project supported by Biofisa, SANBio Biofisa 2. We're producing a pellet for feeding goats using a forage, Melia as a drug, and we are working with Chino University. They were doing the meat goats, we're doing the dairy goats.
Good morning. My name is Justin Manasa. I am from the University of Zimbabwe. I'm also a Gilead Global Health Fellow, and I'm a research associate with the African Institute of Biomedical Science and Technology. At ABIST, our main interest is in precision medicine or precision public health, and our product was called GeneDos. It's a product that we hoped could help reduce side effects associated with one of the HIV drugs, efavirenz.
Okay, like I said, you have a big collection of people with a lot of smart ideas. So what we'll do then, we'll have a conversation with them. If you promise to be as short as you have been, I think I can allow each one of you to have an attempt at all the questions that you we'll be trying to address this morning. So the first set of where we'll be trying to look at, what actually are the major pitfalls in working with the private sector to commercialize publicly funded research outputs. Would it be different if the research was funded by the private sector? Basically, the idea is a lot of our institutions actually develop research, and the question is, should actually our research institutions themselves be taken to market? Or will it be different if the private sector you work with actually funded the research? So we'll start again from the far end.
Right, so we've developed two products, one in Botswana and the other one in South Africa. So this is a sorghum-based non-dairy drinking yogurt, if you like.
we try and place it that way, but at the end of the day, it's maheu with probiotics in it. So as to the question, I think the major thing is just the differences in culture. So the private sector, you know, they are very flexible, they are very agile, but certainly from a university or public sector point of view, you don't get the same kind of attributes. So for instance, if you look at procurement processes, they take forever to just approve things. And in a sense, that frustrates the private sector when you're working with them. So it's actually, I think, it would be better if technologies were licensed out into the private sector, and then the private sector would try to commercialize. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that there is a middle ground, that where universities have developed, put in funding to research, they should be able to benefit from the commercialization. And the researchers themselves, although we often say researchers don't necessarily have the business acumen and maybe are not able to be as agile because of the university structures, they really are the champions of the technology that they've developed. So there needs to be a way to bring universities probably more into a commercial frame of mind through your tech transfer offices, and basically providing a service, consulting type of services, as well as training, which is obviously very important, to allow the researchers to stay within and to continue the commercialization together with the private sector. I do think that it is possible for private sector and universities to work together.
So the university environment and the private sector have different ecosystems. The particular project that I worked on was a collaboration between the University of the Western Cape, Inkaba Biotech, the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe, and the Lesotho Mounted Police in Lesotho. And our project actually came from a number of years of groundwork that was done primarily at the University of the Western Cape, but Inkaba actually got involved in the project fairly early on. The vision was that this would eventually become a project that would become a commercial product, hopefully. And so our environment was slightly different. Yes, there are pitfalls at universities because you have issues with procurement. Things do often take a lot longer, and sometimes the rules of procurement is you need to get 3 quotations and you go with the cheapest quotation irrespective of whether there is a difference in the quality of the product that you're trying to purchase. In a private sector, we do have a bit more freedom because we get to choose which products we want to make use of based on quality, cost, etc. But what is also very important to understand is that in industry, while we do want to engage with a lot of universities to develop future products, we also have to report to a board of trustees. And so R&D, as much as it's extremely beneficial for potential new innovations, when you have got a company and you've got people to report to, you have to show a faster return on investment than you can at a university. So I believe that it's actually more important for universities and industry to collaborate, because the private sector will put the pressure on the universities to develop quicker, and the universities will put a slight pressure on industry to also take a moment, think about the product you're developing, and actually develop something of good quality as well. So it's an ecosystem that I think works quite well together. There are some areas which require a bit more understanding, but that's what meetings are for. You sit down with each shareholder from the university and the different other departments as well, and you reach the middle ground. And I think we've actually been quite successful with our projects. We've been able to understand the requirements of certain features from an academic perspective, but at the same time we've also been able to get to a point where now is the time for commercialization, and it's time to start fidgeting and actually produce a product that can be used in the market. So it's kind of that balance.
Okay, thank you. For me as a researcher, trying to commercialize a product, basically trying to commercialize is like, as a researcher you have all the answers, but when you're commercializing the questions change, and suddenly you have to go back to the drawing board. In our product, which was a nutritious drink, we're partners, we're funded by SANBio, 2 partners, research partners and a commercial partner. The research partner was CSIR from South Africa and NAFTEC from Botswana. And of course, the first challenge that we faced was, if we are commercializing in South Africa, we are using a research partner from another country. They should also commercialize, rightfully so. So we agreed on that one, but it was just the sharing of the intellectual property, which proved to be one of the challenges. And of course, there were other challenges that relating to research and commercialization. For instance, the commercialization partner, are they ready to receive your research and take on the technology and produce the product? Other challenges was like, was there a shared vision in terms of what needs to be delivered? And also we were funded by a funder who also had aspirations, they had expectations. So I think that the complexity of trying to commercialize and trying to achieve something, a common goal, it was just a challenge. But at the end of it all, yes, our partners in Botswana did develop a locally produced product that had indigenous ingredients. We had one in South Africa, and we were both happy. And then of course, and also another challenge that we also faced, because there were 2 research partners involved, the research was so strong. And of course, like as I said, as researchers, you know all the answers until the questions change. And yeah, the questions did change, but we're still happy with the development that has happened so far, because we have products, we have developed capability, we've developed skills, and now we just need to just commercialize our product and move on. And yeah, I think maybe at the end we'll give just the keys to successful commercialization. I've got a whole list of them. For me, it was a learning experience. It was no time wasted. We are grateful to SANBio for funding our project, and for the learning experience, and we are moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, pitfalls, depending on where the money is coming from. If the money is coming from the industry, and research is through contract research, normally there are no problems, because the objective, the result, or the targets are very clear, and you just follow. But now, if the money is coming from a donor, the private sector are interested more in making money fast enough. They're interested in profit. Whereas the donor, the objectives are a bit broad. For example, in this project that we're doing, the donor was trying to have us network, do capacity building, and then R&D was one of the outputs. So you can see that the donor has got a broader target set, but the private sector will just have a narrow target, that is profit making.
Yes. Excuse me. Sorry. Talking about commercialization of products and the role of the private sector and the public sector, the research institute. From our experience, it looks like our role as the research institute or public institute is maybe to assist in the development of the product and to verify that it's going to work, because the private sector would like something that is going to work. So in our project, we were working with a private company, Arrow Feeds, which is involved in producing animal feed. And then we came up with this idea, which was being sponsored by Biofisa, that maybe you can produce a goat pellet, since there is no special feed for the goats. They are giving feeds for the cows instead of for the goats. And with some challenges, because this was starting from scratch, we were using Melia zatarak, which is a forage, a tree. We're using the branches and then mixing those. We started first with the mushroom, mixing it with mushroom, and it didn't work. The animals were not performing well, and the mushroom was not properly digested or efficiently digested by the goats. We therefore progressed and used another protein source, lucerne, and then it seems to be working. So we're working on that, and Chinoi, they've succeeded and finished it with the meat animals, and then with the dairy animals, we're still working with it in Eswatini. Now, what should be there as options for commercialization? Well, as a research institute, maybe we may not easily commercialize. The private sector who are in the business, they are producing the dairy feed, the animal feeds every day. They are in the better position to commercialize. So what we have at UNISWA, we have a commercial company of the university. We have asked it to be part of it. But they want a product that has been tested and it has been demonstrated that it's going to be efficient. And so an alternative will be for the company to mix and then sell to the private company to sell on a commercial or large scale. So we hope we are going to succeed at the end by working with the private sector. Yes, please.
Okay, unfortunately, I think there is no one-size-fits-all to this question. My preference is mostly if we've identified an innovation within our academic institutions, I think that innovation should be pushed out as quickly as possible outside to the, out of the university through very good product management and technology transfer programs. And once it's in industry, I think the good thing is that industry will push so that if it's going to fail, it's going to fail very fast, so that now people can focus on other issues. Because within academia, sometimes we feel attached to our projects or we feel attached to our innovations. And if they are failing, we try to figure out how to salvage them, and sometimes it takes too long. So it's very good to take the products out of the universities, and once they're out, the industry has enough resources in terms of manpower and money to push further development, especially if it's health related, because it's costly. So with that money, they can be able to identify if that product is going to fail or not within a very quick period of time. And then that can save everyone's efforts. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure you can hear me, but I can hear myself. Anyway, thank you very much. I mean, the issues you all raise are important, whether you're looking at the issues of IP or the sources of funding, or whether the product's actually ready for market. But perhaps that's maybe leads us to the next question, which is, well, you have several options, I think, that you already mentioned, that public institutions could use to commercialize their research outputs. But what perhaps we can zero in on what are the key challenges that African universities and research institutions face in commercializing their research outputs through their own startup firms. Everyone says we should actually develop our own businesses from from our research ideas. But what has been actually the biggest problem in trying to commercialize our own research through our own startups that we oversee? And then what factors or regulations actually hinder academic-based startups or spin-offs, and should licensing or selling of the technology actually be considered first? It's something many of you have tried to allude to already, but what extent or when actually should you consider that? So maybe we start from you.
So I'll start with the last question. I think the best, for me, the best way is if there's an innovation, I think through the technology transfer offices, the first option should be to license out the technology. And then if the licensees fail to commercialize the technology, you can withdraw it and offer it to someone else. However, if the academics that work on the technology are interested in working on the innovations themselves, I think they can move out of the university and form a startup company with the right kind of support. Because for me, I think that for a good startup company, you would need maybe 3 kinds of characters. One, a geek, which is the innovator, that works on the problem. Then you also need someone that is very good, a hustler, that is good at looking for the money. And after that, you need someone that knows the marketing, the hippie. So if you don't have, most of the academics don't have the other 2 skills, looking for the money and also marketing. So for me, I think licensing will be the first option. The second option is the academics, they move out of academia into a really new environment and provide them with the right kind of support for them to be able to continue developing their product.
Okay. I'll start with the maybe lessons or challenges that we face. If we are trying as academic institution to develop or produce the product on a large scale, it becomes a challenge. In our experience, we were trying to mix the ingredients before we could take to the office or the feed company, and that worked for a while, and then we had a problem, the mixer broke down. So if this was done by the private company, they are equipped to do that. So that's the challenge that we are facing. That's why maybe we should concentrate on the development of the product, and then we pass it to the private company that is responsible for commercialization and for releasing the product to the market.
I think the first thing that we need to understand, especially as universities, is that universities are not supposed to compete with the private sector in producing products, because that is not their mandate. So a working relationship has to be made where universities churn out, IPs and push these to the existing industry, or cause new industries by coming up with new innovations. But it must end there. Of course, here and there, a university can come up with a spin-off company, but largely, universities should not compete with the private sector in producing goods and services. The key challenges, I will just mention 2. One, in universities, we have got what I can term lack of programmatic research. A research framework that is in form of a program, where you have ideation, innovation, design, testing, retesting, commissioning, and then pushing, prototyping, and then pushing the prototype, the IP of that working prototype to the industry. So lack of that working framework where research is just being done the usual way without having a program. The second thing is lack of supporting institutions. We need to institutionalize this process through innovation hubs, which can accommodate the various stages from ideation up to prototyping. You cannot commercialize from our usual teaching or research laboratories. We need to have a standalone, institutionalized within a particular university or between 2 or 3 universities in form of an innovation hub. Thank you.
coming from the CSIR, in terms of putting your research into the commercial sector, we've had several spin-off companies. Of course, the advantages of spin-off companies is that you have the researchers who have developed the technologies and have the technical skills. And of course, when you have the technical skill, that doesn't mean that you know everything. So you have to develop other type of skills. So incubation, business incubation would help in terms of that, in terms of commercializing research, where now you are into a business. And also, I think we have mentioned, I think my colleagues have mentioned here other types of commercialization of research, where you can have a low-risk scenario where you license the technology, or you do contract research where a private sector or industry approaches a research institute, research university, with specific targets, with specific outputs for research to be done. And also, you have emerging researchers, or rather emerging companies that would like to license your research, but they may not be ready. So in that instance, you will also need to get the researchers involved in those companies. And then of course it will blur the lines between where does research end and where does commercialization end. And as a researcher, I can tell you that even when you commercialize and your product is successful on the market, trust me, all those successful companies have elements of research in them. Your product can go out there, maybe develop problems, it has to come back to research. So the cycle is not just a straight line, but it goes round and round and round. I think I'll finish.
Yes, no, I agree to a very much a large extent. I also think it depends on your market, the type of technology that you've developed. Some technologies can be applied into many, many different industries. Others are sometimes very niche market related. And it does not make sense for a university to develop a startup for a niche market and develop a company out of it, because your return on investment and the amount of money you end up making from that product is very low. You will not be able to hire, a permanent researcher, a permanent marketing person, etc. And so sometimes it is incredibly important for a university to connect with a commercializing partner, especially commercializing partners that have very large portfolios. So companies that, especially in diagnostics and so on, they have a very large portfolio because these products are very specialized. It'll be a genotyping kit for a very specific disease, etc. And developing or making money from that particular genotyping kit is a lot different to selling a nutritional bar, for instance, in a market space where there are billions of people who would actually make use of that. So I think to a large extent, it depends on your particular situation. Sometimes it makes sense for a university to license technology. Sometimes it makes sense for a university to develop a product and a company out of something. I think what I've learned more in the last few years being in industry is that we are challenging the concept of companies and the concept of business models in industry, in academia, etc. Academia is no longer only about educating and doing research. It is now becoming a mandate by universities to generate income in other ways as well, because the people want an affordable education. And therefore, the one way to make an affordable education is generating income through other avenues. And I think we're challenging the world on a much larger global scale. Companies, the concept of companies is changing. A good example of that is Uber and Airbnb and all the rest. Companies don't have to have a building and a huge managerial structure, etc. You could have a company and have everyone work for themselves. So I think a person, especially from an education institute, like a university, I think you sometimes have to read a bit more, kind of figure out what is the right story for the research you're doing, for the products you're trying to develop, and so on. Sometimes research will not turn into a product. Sometimes the environment or the market is not ready for it. It'll only be ready for it in 20 years' time. So it also depends on how innovative your ideas are. That's another very important factor to take into consideration.
I agree on a lot of the points that have come before. I do think there is still a gap between commercial companies and universities. We still need to find ways where they can meet and find more middle ground. I feel like university research has quite often been funded through a kind of bootstrapping kind of model. There's maybe a lot of funding at very early stage, and then there's a lot of funding at the very commercial side, and a lot of the middle proof of concept and that type of work isn't actually enabled through our current system. So what you have is university research which is not necessarily marketable, as you mentioned. So, I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of universities are really trying to push this and are really trying to get industry and researchers to speak more the same language and go in the same direction, but I'm sure it is quite challenging. And then I also feel, there's quite a push on researchers to publish. There's a push to patent, and quite often this is almost quite premature and actually prevents a product from getting onto the market because perhaps it's not been patented in the right way, or it's just not. So funding is being spent, but it's not in a programmatic way. And I think, if it could be more focused right through early stage, through to proof of concept and taking it right through the lines, then we could maybe develop more marketable products out of universities, and industry and universities could work together very, very well.
Thank you very much. I think I'd like to disagree actually with my colleague who says universities are not supposed to compete. Actually, that is the mandate in the marketplace, is that anybody should be free to compete. Somebody mentioned efavirenz. So if you look at, there's a drug called emsatribine. That stands for emorisatribine. It's actually from a university. And particularly in Africa, I think it's sad because in Africa, most of our knowledge is locked up in universities. So actually we need to unlock that knowledge so that it goes into the marketplace and places solutions to African problems. And I think, that's what we've tried to do. Now, I come from a University of Technology, and I've asked people there, what is the difference between a University of Technology and a university? There must be a difference, because a University of Technology should be able to package ideas into technologies that go into the marketplace. And one of the things that worries me is that kind of thinking. But also the other thing is, what also worries me is that we have a business school in our university, and our business school is absent from any of the other technologies that are developed. So what we need is, we need to make a university that is integrated in its thinking, so that when you are in science, you are also attending a module or two in the business school. When you're in business school, come and hear what the scientists are doing, because that's where the ideas come from. I mean, if you look at the Silicon Valley model, why does Silicon Valley thrive? It's because of Stanford Business School. So actually it starts with the business, and then going out and finding ideas. Maybe just the last thing, which I found quite funny, was a few weeks ago, we had our graduation. And I didn't know that the university has an entrepreneur's oath. So all the students stand up there and they talk about how they will be entrepreneurs, use their knowledge, to create businesses. But this is at the end, on the last day in their university. They are reciting an oath, something that they should be doing on the first day. So that as they make their journey through the university, they are constantly aware that whatever we learn, we should be able to turn into products, into services, into business. Thank you.
Okay, it's always nice to not agree with each other. After all, that's why we're here. And I think there are different cases so that we're learning from. I think all of you have talked about how we work either with the private sector, but perhaps the last thing we'd be trying to look at is how should actual public-private sector partnerships be configured if we have to successfully commercialize our research output. When do they work best, and actually when do they fail? I think we are concentrating more on what worked and how it did well, but we also want to know when actually things really didn't work with our private partners. There is almost a glorifying of the private sector, like they have all the answers. Actually, they don't. Speaking from experience, we work with a lot of them that literally fail too. After all, businesses fail every day. Of course, I agree with the concept that universities actually a business themselves. So they generate money. Teaching is a big business, just like research. So in any case, what kind of configurations actually should we be looking at in designing our public-private partnerships in the process of commercializing research? How should we handle funding? Whether it goes through our private partners or should it go through our public universities? Or what was your experience actually having a private sector partner and a public sector partner in handling funding for taking your products to market or designing your startups? Maybe from that. If you see me blink twice, please stop talking.
Okay. Well, yeah, all right. Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, I think I talked about procurement processes at the beginning, so that's like they say, businesses don't fail because they don't have money. They fail because they don't have cash flow. So the money could be piled up in the room, in a room somewhere, but it's not flowing through. And that's what would happen normally if the procurement processes hold you back. So actually putting money into the private partner is a better way of doing things. And in this country, they have a funding tool called TRIP. And what happened with TRIP initially was that the money would go to universities. And then they found it wasn't actually that efficient. And now they've put it into private sector. And I think if there are colleagues in the room from DTI or people who've used TRIP, it seems to be more efficient that way. So I would say, and again, let's go to Africa. In the African setup, actually there's low scientific literacy in the private sector. And that is why professors should be setting up businesses, because they're taking that knowledge and dissipating it in the marketplace. And I think it goes to your point that some of these businesses might get the funding, but they don't understand, the science. I think we're talking about innovation here, so they don't understand those things. They want to sell chickens, not the chicken feed, which is scientifically formulated.
We didn't have a university partner, so we were a private sector and an NGO working together. But I think one of the areas where Professor Plateau has already alluded to is the bureaucracy within universities, and that makes it quite difficult to manage funding that ends up in universities. It does really make a lot more sense to put it in the private sector, or to find a way to maybe make other kind of contributions from within the university, as opposed to monetary contributions. And then just something that's a slightly different point, but one of the areas where just the whole funding negotiations between universities and commercial partners sometimes fails is on the valuing of technology. Obviously, universities have put in years of research, they've put in salaries, they've put in infrastructure and all these kind of things. They want to value the technologies very highly, but quite often they are new technologies, very novel, and they can't actually, there is no benchmark for those things. So the actual negotiations quite often break down with universities and private sector. And it's basically, at some point you have to compromise, otherwise, technologies will remain hidden in universities and not be able to reach the marketplace.
Okay, so again, I think it has a large extent to do with the models. Some companies do an enormous amount of R&D. So I think it is industry dependent. I, at Inkaba Biotech, do an enormous amount of R&D that is pretty much 80% of my job. And my job is to take what is known, develop products and services, and get it out into the market as soon as possible. And that is what we do fairly successfully. So I think sometimes, the challenge is foundational research. A company is not necessarily going to invest in research just to find out something really cool. A company will want to know, you found out this really cool thing, how can it be applied in a market space? How can we make a difference? How can we make a product out of it? So I think foundational research a company is not necessarily going to invest in. But the next step, proving that this concept can be implemented in industry, that is something that industry can actually invest in and is more willing to invest in, because they also want to see a return on investment. I think biotech is a really exciting field to be in, because that is pretty much the industry. Biotech companies do an enormous amount of R&D, and it's constant R&D, 24/7. Some of the most incredible researchers that I've met, and I meet an enormous amount of people with the job that I currently have, because I meet people from all different universities in the whole of Africa and overseas in America and Europe as well. So I'm in the fantastically fortunate position to meet people from completely different backgrounds. And many biotech companies that I have worked with and interacted with and so on, some of those scientists are absolutely incredible. And so I think it's sometimes a little short-sighted to think that the best researchers stay in academia. I don't think that's always the case. I think it's got to do with where a person wants to be in their life. There are companies like Thermo Scientific, New England Biosciences, etc., England Biolab, sorry, and a variety of other companies like QIAGEN. There's so many. And they have an entire research division that does research. The difference is that research is not in the public domain, because it's internal R&D and internal IP that they want to make money out of. So I think that's the other challenge. If you have a relationship or a memorandum of understanding between a university and a company, it's sometimes a lot easier to get products in the market, because they can do a lot of the foundational research, assist with the progression from foundation into product conceptualization and development. And then a commercializing partner will really do the final steps. But that's also a different model. You can sometimes have a biotech company that does everything. There are companies that do a lot of foundational research, because some companies have the foresight to understand that scientists that go into a company also are scientists. So there's often a relationship. You get 20% of your time that you can do any research you want in any field, but only 20% of your time. And the rest of the time that you have, you actually need to do R&D for the company and develop products. And it's companies like 3M that do, they have that type of model.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think my colleagues have said almost everything. Looking at the partnerships between universities, which are knowledge generation research institutes like CSIR, and the private sector, the main role is that the universities and research institutes have the ability to bring together the multidisciplinary aspect that's required for innovation and for the complex problems that are developing every day. So for me, such a partnership must have several elements for it to succeed. Some of them have been summarized in some of the studies. For example, I saw one on the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, which says basically the institutes must share a vision for impact, and they must share goals. there must also be communication, and communication is it's not just talking to them, but share ideas and information. Like as Professor Katerera says, that scientists should also go out there. So this sharing of information ideas, then the companies will realize that, okay, we need to employ somebody who has sciences. I know people with PhDs, sometimes they find it so hard to find jobs because people look at you and say, what are you looking for? What do you want? But if there is that information sharing, then we realize that we do need research in the industry. Also, there should be, and of course, the agreement on the use of intellectual property should also be forefront. And of course, the relationship shouldn't be just be short-term. It must be long-term, because we know that long-term relationships have, you share the risk, yes, of course, and also there's accountability, and also there's higher impact. There are many other factors that can contribute to that. Yeah. So engaging with industry partners is not just talking to them and just signing a contract, but it should be a long-term relationship to understand each other and how each one of us works. Thank you. I hope it didn't blink.
Yeah, thank you. You used a very good word, configuration. To start with, if the configuration is wrong, there is no progress. My colleague here has used another good word, partnership. So for funding to flow between universities and the industry, we need to configure the relationship in a partnership format. And I still insist that universities should not compete with industry in manufacturing goods. Otherwise, if I'm competing with the industry will never give me money to do research. I should be viewed as a partner. The project that I was leading is in an industry where there are 23 very big companies in Zimbabwe. 23. So if my university starts manufacturing livestock feed, I'll be competing with the 23 big companies. And all those 23 big companies will view me as a competitor, and they will never bring money to the university for contract research.
Thanks. I'll be brief too, because most of the points have been covered. On the specific question of funding, my view is that we should split it. The commercialization, you should go to the private sector, fund it for commercialization. But for product development, it should come to the institution, to the university. I have reasons for that. In the university, or in the public sector where we do research, we have the researchers who can cope with research risk, and it cannot happen elsewhere else. So this should be split. We have funding going to the institution, and then funding going to the private sector for commercialization.
Thank you. I'll try to be very brief. For me, I think most important thing is, where did the idea come from? If the idea came from academia and engaged industry, it's a different model, and then it depends on what work is going to be done in industry or in academia. For example, if it's clinical trials, and if industry comes to us and say, can you do a clinical trial for us? It means that most of the funding will not then come to the university. If it's me going to industry to get assistance in product development, then most of the funding will go to industry. But that's, for example, I've worked with Thermo Fisher on 2 products that we collaborated to develop. The first one it was an HIV drug resistance kit that it was an idea in the lab, and we wanted to commercialize it and make it much more accessible. We engaged them, they had more experience in developing such kind of products. So they then guided us now in the development process. So it all depends on how you start in the first place, and then you can then develop your relationship from there.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's a lot that has been said. So before we let them go, you all get a chance to ask questions and perhaps suggest cool ideas on how we can encourage public-private partnerships and how actually we can help universities to bring their products to market. I'm always surprised that universities and research institutions think they're the only ones generating knowledge. So no one talks about spin-ins, like knowledge coming from elsewhere. And marketing is one thing that was so said so rarely. I think a firm has only two businesses, innovation and marketing. Anyway, yes, please.
Thank you, sir. My name is David Molefe from the Department of Trade Industry. One of the speakers talked about the THRIP. THRIP initially was with the National Research Fund. We took it from that institution because one of the speakers also said we don't eat papers, we eat product. Therefore, we took the program, the money, and then we issued the money to the industry. So industry will collaborate with the university to undertake a research. And over and above that, we said to the university they must involve the students at the fourth year level, which is honors up to master's or doctorate. Then we give the bursary for doing that research. With the issue of the IP, before we can release the money to the university, so to the industry, there must be an agreement between the university and the industry that where the IP transfer will lies. So for me, I'm saying the industry should come up with the money, and the research institution or university must do the research. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question? Actually, that was more or less a contribution.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Emmanuel Ibueze from UNISA. First of all, I want to start by saying I believe that anything that has to do with institution, probably especially universities, is actually just for education. It's for training. So I think I want to agree with him that universities should stick to educating and training. They should never compete with the business. Okay? That's one thing. So I also want to agree with Prof again when Prof said sciences should know a little of the marketing, and though the marketing should know a little of science, they go hand in hand. And that brings me to the major question. When I looked at the panel here, I'm expecting to see anyone from the Department of Education, South Africa, and I can't find anyone here. I'm saying this because there's an issue that is being discussed recently. They said from grade 4, they want to start teaching them sexual, whatever. I don't want to mention the other names here. From grade 4. And I feel very, very bad because from grade 4, a grade 4 learner, he shouldn't learn some sexual issues. I don't care how they want to explain it. But I believe we're talking about sciences here. Department of Education or someone from government should be able to sit down here and find out that we have so much problems that we need to begin to educate our kids. You go to South Korea, you go to North Korea, from grade 2, grade 3, they're already developing beautiful things. They're in school. But our own kids here, they want to start teaching them what I don't know from grade 4. So I believe when we talk of sciences, the Department of Education, Minister of Education should be here to understand that we have pressing issues, both sciences and marketing. They need to know. Or else, whatever we say here dies here. We just go home and unachieved. They go there and form a curriculum that will affect our kids. Our kids are the future generation. During my own time, they never discuss such things in grade 4, even up to grade 8, 12. You learn those things while hiding, not even in the syllabus. And we're here discussing these things and we're clapping for ourselves when our future, our kids, will start learning what I don't know from grade 4. So please, science is very important and they should engage the Department of Education and the Minister of Higher Education. Thank you very much.
I see 2 hands. They should be the last one. Okay, 3 hands. So can you have please 1 minute, don't explain. Just say what it is you want to say. We will try and figure out what you want to mean.
Thank you very much. My name is Domingos Neto from Angola. First of all, thank you for Dr. Eric Shakawi and SANBio for all arrangements. I just want to receive some inputs from the panel. How to involve the researchers dealing with time. We can take the example of singers. They prepare music, they will sing, but not necessary to sell CDs. And how to involve the research? What is the best way to be linked with the startups or to do the research and to go to the market at the same time? Maybe the percentage of time will be very important.
Thank you. There was a answer. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Chamnorwa from the Innovation Hub. I just want to comment on the issue of whether universities should compete with industry or create their own industries. I think the issue that we need to look into is the context in which universities in Africa were established. We've got universities in Africa, but not African universities, that were established to create laborers. So how do we move from laborer mentality to an entrepreneurial mentality? So we need to look at context. Yes, in certain instances we can compete with industry, in certain instances we cannot. But if we are looking at starting and growing industries, we must have companies coming from the universities, talking to our context, and then we grow industries that way. Let's not shy away from starting our own and continue, and let's not continue with the laborer mentality. UNISA have got an education decolonial unit. I think we need to take advantage of that.
There's one more. My brother from Zim. Okay. We'll definitely allow you to speak because we haven't had a lady actually. Yes, please.
My name is Don. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm from industry, private sector. In business, we have two C's, the letter C. And generally, they are standing for two things. It's either collaboration or it's competition. Now, I think that certainly speaking for my country, the problem is that there is not enough collaboration between government and perhaps other institutions that also set up universities and private sector. So you'll find that, I think that initially with government, I would like to see government generally in Africa, I think it might be different in South Africa, because from what we've heard this morning, I think there's a lot of input from government into research, development of products and so on. But certainly the experience that we have further up north is that governments are more preoccupied with politics rather than economics of ensuring that there is enough economic development in their countries. So I think that the critical thing here is a reorientation of the minds of those who are in power so that they start to work together. I think it's not so much that it should, we mustn't live in boxes, that university is here, private sector is there, and others are there. I think we should all work together, right from the start. And I think it depends also very much on the nature of the project, whether most of the work is being done in the university or whether it's being done in the private sector. But I think for me, the key thing is collaboration and understanding the roles that each one is doing, okay, in the collaboration. And I think you'll find we'll be more successful. I'll just end up by saying, I was in Singapore not so long ago. Singapore, who is leading development there is government. It's not the private sector. The government is taking it upon itself to ensure that Singapore is at the top. And I think it's one of the top 4 countries, if I'm not mistaken. If you go to the Arab Emirates, it's the same thing. Okay? In Dubai today, it's government, which is saying this is the way we should be going. And they're attracting talent from all over the world. It's not the private sector. So collaboration is key. And knowing what you're doing in the partnership. Thank you.
Okay, we have the last one, then we close.
Yes, my name is Sasatanazo from Mozambique. I have both sides. I'm a researcher, but also I used to be teaching at university. What I understood from our panelists is that collaboration is key for the success of any research. Because nowadays, a research institution can even develop a product, but at small scale. So, to make sure that that product that it was developed in small scale should be massified or should be taken to the market, they should, from start, work with private sector or other organizations, and not just doing poor research and then take the results and give to someone else. That's why we have changed a little bit our approach. We use more what it is called the research and innovation platforms, where we have a kind of a chain of stakeholders, so to make sure that our research will reach the end user or the market. So I think that our panelists shared their experience, but from there we can take that message that collaboration is key, and it's not a matter of competition. Competition is okay, but I think the roles of universities and of research institutes are clear, but we should work together to get better results. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just wondering, anyone here feels very injured? Nope. No one? Okay, then can we clap for them, please? I think there have been a lot that has been shared this morning, and I agree with all of you. Perhaps there's just one thing that we seem to agree with, that change is happening, and our institutions need to evolve over time. After all, the research lab that all of you are talking about was never in the university. It's actually a new thing. The research lab was never part of the university. In the olden days, if you wanted to do research and you were in a university, you got out and went and worked with the industry. The reason why all your famous scientists ended up doing work in the private sector, or you literally got fired. But slowly we got the research lab. It's now a permanent member of the university. And slowly we got in your entrepreneurship hubs, whether starting first with work in Germany and recently in the US and everywhere else. We are beginning to accept that perhaps entrepreneurship should be really a core part of our academic systems. I'm not so sure where our academic systems, my brother here is talking about, how actually got lost, because at the time I went to school, when I was in primary school, we actually taught to configure things. We learned how to make cooking sticks and all kinds of things, how to make canoes, so that I grew up close to a river. So somewhere we have lost something that we need to rediscover. You couldn't actually pass your junior secondary school if you didn't have a project that you showcase how it affects people's lives. So in a way, if we are losing something, let's just get it back. It's not that we are just trying to rediscover ourselves. So thank you very much for being an excellent audience. You can clap for yourselves.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much for facilitating this session. And of course, to our lovely audience, thank you so much for being very interactive. The fact that we had a lot of questions obviously is a sign that you enjoyed this particular discussion. Well, it feels good being here as well. All right, so here is what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen. We will break off for lunch after, probably as soon as I get the indication, but we might break off for lunch after the next presentation. And this will be a spotlight focusing on what's happening in the regulatory framework in health. And this one will be presented by Ms. Andrea Jalsin Keita, South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we will go for lunch early, that means that we really need to be very good with our time management. Let's be back after 45 minutes so that we can just have the rest of the program and conclude in good time. Do we agree? Okay, thank you so much. Allow me now to call upon Ms. Andrea Jalsing Keita, South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. And the spotlight is on what's happening in the regulatory framework in health. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Can I just get Yes, thanks. So good afternoon. You know, they always say when you stand between the colleagues and lunchtime, you've got a very tough job on your hands. But anyway, let's see how we go. I just want to spend today, thank you, to give you an update about what the South African Regulatory Authority is doing and the changes that have been made. And then also, I think a lot of you in the audience are involved in, you know, coming up with new technologies, new products, whether they're complementary medicines or medical devices, and it can be very overwhelming trying to understand the regulatory framework that is in place in South Africa and how we can be in compliance and fulfill all the requirements of the regulator. So I think to start off with, the reason why we regulate products in South Africa is because of the piece of legislation, which is the Medicines and Related Substances Act, 1965. And many people will say, you know, this piece of legislation is so old, it comes dating back all the way 1965, what relevance does it have today? But in actual fact, this piece of legislation was amended as early as, or as recent as June 2017. So the biggest changes that we see in this regulation is that we used to be known as the Medicines Control Council, and we are now the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. With this change, we see that now medical devices become part of the mandate of the regulator. In the past, we never regulated medical devices, but now it is a requirement. We no longer have a registrar of medicines, but rather a CEO. Our council has been dissolved, and we now have a governance board that would be responsible for the governance of SAPRA, which is a public entity. So there's a lot of changes. Also, in terms of the industry, one might say, okay, how can a product be available in America or Europe, but yet here in South Africa it's not available? Why is that? It's not acceptable. What's the regulator doing? We're just sitting there and we never answer the phones. So these are the perceptions that are out there, and we're not the only country that has this reputation, faces challenges. We are a very resource-limited agency. If you compare us with the USA, I mean, they've got thousands of staff there. You will see that within SAPRA, or what used to be the Medicines Control Council, we've got 200 staff members. And we've got huge volumes of applications that come in, and something for us to obviously address. So what I really want to share with you is there is change coming. It's a very exciting time to be in South Africa, to have your products regulated by a very competent regulatory authority. It's also important to just realize, if you are in this industry, this is a regulated industry. The onus is on you to be familiar with those regulatory requirements. Don't say, oh, I didn't know, that's why I never complied. There are really penalties for those people who are not in compliance with the Act. Your product will not go to market if you're not in compliance with these requirements. There's the legislation, and then just to highlight, there are two pieces of regulations. One which we call the general regulations, which talks to our medicines. So if you are in this complementary medicine space, those regulations will talk to you. And then there's also the separate regulations on medical devices. So it's important for you to read through these things. If you are in a book club, just leave your book club. There is a lot of material for you to read available on our website. So please familiarize yourself with these documents. The exciting part is we have our board, our SAPRA board established, and this board has established certain committees. We've got our general things in terms of governance, finance committees. We've also got a strategic operational committee. So all these new committees have been formed, and they're really starting to gain momentum. Also, all the SAHPRA policies have been developed and have been approved by the board. We have relocated. Many of you are still trying to find us at the Civitas building in Pretoria CBD, and you will find nobody there. We've all relocated here to the CSIR campus, so please, you are welcome. All your submissions should be coming through to this new venue. If you want to meet with our CEO, this is where you need to be. And I think what's really exciting is that while we do have the MCC staff component that has been transferred to SAHPRA, there was a great advertorial that was published on the 8th of May, where we've actually advertised 107 new posts. So if you are tired of being an entrepreneur or a researcher or in the university or in the industry, come and join us and be a regulator. There's really exciting opportunities, and we're looking for expertise. We need people with this type of experience. We're really trying to recruit the cream of the crop to help us to support the work of the regulator and really be one of the top regulators in Africa and even potentially in the world. So it's really exciting. The other change with this legislation, in the past, if you have been working with the regulator, you know we charge fees, okay? So we don't use these fees to go on lovely year-end functions in Mauritius. In the past, we used to take this money and give it back to National Treasury. Now with the change in legislation, we're able to ring-fence our money and use our money to attract those extra experts that we need, or to enhance our electronic platforms to provide better service delivery. So that's also a really exciting change that's happening. We will have a new SAHPRA website. I don't know if you've ever visited the MCC website, but I'm sure you would have given up within 5 minutes and said, oh no, I'm not interested in this regulator. But the SAHPRA website will be adjusted, should be much easier to navigate. We're also hoping to go live with searchable databases so you can see who are those companies that are licensed with SAHPRA, which products are registered, who's my competition if I want to generate a new product and put it on the market. You'd probably be able to see that. And then also we are trying to streamline our processes. We have had very old, outdated processes that were just simply not able to keep up with the demand of, for example, applications we were receiving. If you look, we do have a bit of a backlog. We've inherited a backlog from MCC. It was our own backlog. But it's for a number of reasons. We had a lot of external evaluators. We had huge volumes coming in. We're only able to deal with about 2,500 applications in a year, but we were getting over 4,000. So you could see over time how these backlogs start to build up. Also, you've got companies who submitted and then their product not registered in a time frame that they would thought would be appropriate, so they resubmit the same document. Those are challenges, or multiple generics of the same product. Why have I got 200 different paracetamols on the market? Is it necessary? Should we have policies to limit those? These are all type of questions, but at the end of the day, the exciting part is SAHPRA has really looked at this and said, we know we've got limited resources. How can we improve? How can we modernize our systems, streamline, and really be a responsive regulator who's effectively regulating and in timelines that are really acceptable for the stakeholders. So that's just a bit of info on the backlog. And then there comes the point with complementary medicines. A lot of the people on the panel here have mentioned that they were in the process or they have developed these complementary medicines. So what does the regulator do? We're supposed to register these products and allow them to be put on the market. Now, if you look at complementary medicines, these are considered to be medicines, category D medicines. And back in 2012, the Medicines Control Council had said these products should be registered. They should be evaluated by the regulator before they go onto the market. However, there were hiccups. Anybody who's been involved in this industry will know and tell you their frustrations that they've had with the regulator. What happened is that when this framework was actually established initially, it was only for what we call a discipline-specific complementary medicines. So to Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, homeopathic, Western homeopathic, or combination products. And then they're saying the modern complementary medicine, so those are our so-called health supplements or vitamins, were left out of this framework. So it was very
disruptive for the roadmap for complementary medicines, and very frustrating for stakeholders who are trying to comply and we're not sure where they stand. If you do go now onto our SAPRA website, you will see there is a registration application for complementary medicines, all of them, because the framework has been revived, and August 2017 it became all-inclusive for all the complementary medicines. So if you have developed this type of product, you do need to register this product, and you'll see there are various modules. There are actually 5 modules. It's a common technical document that does need to be completed. And recently, SAPRA has also prepared what we call the screening template for new applications for the registration of complementary medicines. So while there was a little bit of a slow start to this, SAPRA is really gearing up. They want to also be responsive and fulfill their mandate that they will be assessing these products. You will be required to register them. You will be subject to inspection by the MC or the SAPRA inspectorate, and so you do need to fulfill these requirements. The next element, this is just for those who have left their book club. Here are some guidelines to read on the complementary medicines. You can see there are quite a number. So remember, we've got the big piece of legislation, then we've got the regulations, and these guidelines actually set out to further explain to you what is required from you as somebody who wants to put this product on the market. Now, my favorite topic of discussion, medical devices. This new regulatory framework for medical devices has been implemented. Starting from June 2017, when our new legislation was published, and we said we now have to regulate medical devices. This also includes IVDs and non-IVDs, okay? There are over 2 million medical devices in about 26,000 categories, and we go from big pieces of electromedical equipment like CT scanners to the wooden tongue depressor that the doctor uses. That is also a medical device. But if Vida E coffee shop decides to use those same stirrers for coffee, and they're also wooden stirrers that the doctor uses, those ones at Vida E are not medical devices. But the one the doctor uses, that's a medical device. So it's a really complicated, intricate piece of legislation, something that's not so easy to implement. But we are following the WHO global model for implementation. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We do also recognize the work of the IMDRF, which is the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum. So again, we look to global best practice. We're also new in this. We've never done it before. So we're learning together with the industry. And what we're doing is a 2-phased approach. Step 1, licensing of medical device establishments. So if you are a company who manufactures a medical device, or you import a device, or you want to export, or you wholesale a medical device in our country, you must have a license. Okay, no more hiding away from that. Second of all, we will start with the registration of medical devices, but that will come later in the year. There is no medical device registered in this country at the moment. Okay, so please remember that. We will start with that later. Step 1 is your licensing. Oops. Just be aware that medical devices are classified in terms of risk. That same wooden tongue depressor is a Class A medical device. It's low risk. The duration of use is short. It's non-invasive. So you can understand why we're saying it's a low-risk device. All right. Then we look at something like HIV self-test kit. This is a Class D medical device. While it's also short duration on use, minimally invasive, if we think about what the outcomes are in terms of our health priorities in South Africa, you can understand the importance in terms of risk. Something like a drug-eluting stent, that will also be Class D, high risk, or a hip implant. Think of that. Very invasive, long duration of use, and the quality of that product really needs to meet those essential principles of safety and performance. Oh, I've lost somebody at the back. Goodness gracious. Okay, let's see. Then licensing. We had call up for licensing. You had to apply for your license application. The deadlines already were August 2017 for manufacturers and distributors and wholesalers, February 2018. So if you don't have a license today, tough tackies, I'm going to penalize you. Your product will not be on the market, okay? And let me tell you that Port Health, they've got eyes and ears everywhere. If you were historically bringing in shipments of whatever product, Port Health will stop you and say, where's your license? And then they phone me and I say, no, I've never heard of this guy before. Then they just send your products back to where they came from. So please ensure that you are licensed, and there are the application forms available. Just in case if you're not licensed, please apply. The documents are available on the website. And step 2 will be registration. So again, we've got application forms available. We've got guidelines to explain to you how the application form should be filled in. And then we will also publish revised fees. The fees for medical device registration will not be as high as we see for medicines. In fact, you will be delightfully surprised to see how reasonable those fees are. Good. So just also, if you are a company that does want to put in any kind of bid for tenders that are published, please be aware you cannot tender for a bid unless you are licensed. And when we call up for registration of your product, if you have not received your registration certificate, you may not put in a bid for that tender. So be aware. We're also best friends with National Treasury and the procurement officers provincially, so they're also very aware of these regulatory requirements. You are welcome to contact us if you've got any questions. There's a whole bunch of email addresses and phone numbers to get hold of us. So please, if for any reason you are going through the process, you're trying to get any of your products onto the market and you're not sure what to do, we are here to provide assistance to you, to put you in the right direction, let you know which guidelines are appropriate for you, where the application forms can be found, let you know about timelines for such registrations or licensing. But please do not say you did not know, okay? And spread the word, because if you are in this industry, these regulatory requirements are applicable to you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Let me come to you. Anybody else with questions? All right, so we've got 2 questions.
Good day to you. My name is Paul. Just want to find out from you, what is your attitude towards African or domestic medication? Second.
Just repeat that. What is the
attitude
towards
domestic medication?
Okay.
Domestic treatment. Okay. What do you call it?
African traditional medicine. Yes.
Although I don't like the word traditional, that's why
Okay.
I'm using
Okay.
domestic. And then secondly, what is your turnaround time?
Okay, great questions.
Because,
Thank you for that.
I've heard stories.
I told you we had a bad reputation. That's why I come in to tell you the good news. It is true. You know, any regulator should benchmark themselves against other regulators. And certainly, you know, when you look at some regulators, USA, Europe, Canada, Australia, they are able to register a product in about 400 days. But that also, just bear in mind, that is the time spent with the regulator. Remember, there's also some time spent with the applicant in terms of to and fro. Now, you will have heard, because everybody's talking about it, but South Africa is taking about 5 years or even longer to register a product, which is not acceptable. We do have a framework where we're able to fast track certain new chemical entities, so where there is a new technology available, we do have mechanisms to fast track those, or in terms of a health priority, we're able to fast track. And so we do see significantly lower timelines for those type of fast track products. But we recognize it is really high. We are not comparable to other regulators of similar size, and we need to fix it. So that's why I think there's really a lot of excitement about what's coming with SAPRA, because with all these changes that are implemented and all the improvements planned, we really are going to be seeing a great or significant decrease in registration timelines. So that's number one. And number two, my attitude towards African traditional medicine. We don't have an attitude. We classify these as our Class D medicines, and they fall within those disciplines that we do mention within our frameworks. And so when we do set forward, you know, we've got regulations and we've got requirements, and those would all be applied consistently throughout the various types of complementary medicines.
Hi, how's it? Jonathan Dean from Highfield Biotech. I'm sure everyone's heard here about a company called Theranos that was operating in the USA, and they're now a defunct company. They were able to raise over $600 million without showing any scientific evidence with their medical device, and now they've lost everything. But in South Africa, without that sort of advanced regulatory system, if they're able to get away with that kind of thing in European or American markets, is there that sort of work happening here, or how would we even know if we don't have the scientific expertise? And if we have sort of government officials who say beetroot cures HIV and that sort of thing, where does our sort of regulatory affairs stand?
Thanks, that's really a great question. So just in terms of medical devices, the framework's a little bit different because we certainly use what we call a reliance mechanism because we are resource scarce in terms of that, and also because we don't have a long history of regulating medical devices. So if you look at our model, which is based on the WHO model, any country is responsible mostly for import control and what we call vigilance. So you must be aware of what is on your market, and if something's coming from other areas, what is coming in and who's bringing it in. So through the licensing process, we were able to have a company license. They then appoint a responsible person who's your authorized rep, who's responsible in terms of the law. That person also made a declaration, written declaration, to say any product that they've listed in their application that went on the market has either been, if it's those high-risk devices, registered in one of the 6 jurisdictions that we recognize as South Africa, which includes EU, USA, Canada, Australia, Japan, and Brazil, which are also our regulators who really have a lot of wealth of experience here. So what we find in South Africa is a large majority of the products in our country on our market were imported from these countries that are very highly regulated. So we've got that comfort, if I can put it that way. And in terms of local manufacture, what we see is it's more the lower risk products that are being manufactured in our country. And usually these products have actually been registered in one of those 6 jurisdictions by the local manufacturers. So from a compliance point of view, it is our duty now to make sure that we don't have, we call them the cowboys because they say the wild, wild west. That's the medical device industry. And we need to have our law enforcement officials really actively ensuring compliance. The good news is we've got a number of engagements with people like Port Health, who often inform us. Also competitors also tell us what people are doing. So there's a lot of snitching, and we love it because we can't be everywhere all the time. So we really use this intelligence that is brought to us and then act upon it. So we recall products, we take products off the market, we stop licenses, we stop products coming in. So we really are trying to beef that up. If you see in our advertorial, we've got posts there for compliance dedicated to medical devices. So come and join us and be one of the people that are patrolling the Wild West. There seems to be one more. I don't know if you want to take it. It's empty. Oh.
Okay, so how many do we have at the back? Are you able to just come through very quickly? Right.
My question is on the medicine part. You mentioned very well that countries like Japan, we are well regulated. But one of the aspects we look at Japan is that they don't just take any medication because they've been done in a well-regulated other jurisdiction. They do breaking studies. We see many times that some of the medication that comes in, that comes in, this wonder card, but one thing of hopefully is that to see adverse events that we not seen there elsewhere. What's your comment on that?
So even though we do have recognized jurisdictions, it's always important to realize that there will always be country-specific requirements. So if we just compare Japan to South Africa, the diversity in the population, ethnic considerations are significantly different. So you may find that while a product was registered and approved in Japan, we will say, okay, it's fine, but then please, we'd like to see the clinical studies in our type of population more representative. And from an adverse event reporting point of view, step one is we really rely on users of medicines and medical devices to report when they have any kind of adverse events. And we've also tried to develop systems so that adverse event reporting is easier for anybody out there. We've got really a dedicated team who looks after vigilance, so both the pharmacovigilance for medicines as well as for medical devices. So they would also receive any alerts. If there was alert in, I don't know, Botswana, for example, it will come to South Africa and will say, do we have this product in our country? Do we have this batch? Was anybody affected here? So we really try to actively work to circumvent any detrimental effects that might come about or affect our population in terms of adverse events.
Okay, until now, you've charged the fee for establishment registration, am I right?
Yes.
So I'm sure you know my next question is, when you call up the individual devices, will there be a fee payable for every device?
Yes.
And how much?
Okay, so great question. We will not call up for registration until our fees are published. To publish fees, we've already drafted fees. We're just waiting for finalization from our finance committee. We would then publish for a 3-month comment period, and everybody's welcome to comment. We will then take the comments and then finalize the fees and implement. So like I said, the fees for medical devices are actually significantly less than what we see for medicines, because for example, medicine fee, I can't remember the exact figure, but let's say it's 50,000 Rand for an application. I've got a company with 68,000 medical devices listed. I cannot charge them 50,000 Rand for an application. So what we've done a risk stratification and said, okay, a higher risk product could have a higher registration fee in comparison to a low risk product where a class A, and also globally we see this is almost a self-notification. So you go online and you say, I've got this product, these are the details. You pay a nominal fee, especially for a class A device, and you get your registration certificate generated. So it'll be very different to what we see for medicine. And I think the industry will also be we'll be able to digest with comfort the new fees that we're going to propose.
So in Europe, they've harmonized their regulatory activities. Are there efforts to do that in Africa, or at least in Southern Africa, so that we don't duplicate things?
Oh yes, great question. And for sure, in actual fact, what you'll find is that in terms of medicines registration collaboration, we've got our SADC region is actually really one of the front runners, where they've come up with the Zazibona collaboration scheme, where we've got Zazibona stands for Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Botswana. Did I say that right? Zazibona. Yes. So those are the 4 countries why it got called Zazibona. South Africa is a member. Other SADC countries are also joining. And what we're able to do is actually, because of our harmonized process and convergence in terms of our guidelines and regulatory requirements, those countries are able to look at one product application, agree or assess, and then if there's agreement to register, well, shall I say the assessment happens once off, and then the countries can decide whether or not they want to accept that assessment. So you already see we're seeing a streamlined process, a faster turnaround time, and also a really meeting of minds and gathering of expertise in order to assess a product and make a regulatory decision. So indeed, South Africa and Africa is on the forefront there.
That will be the last one. Sorry, it was just a quick, short follow-up on that harmonization thing. So are you saying that if you're accepted in one country, accepts and registers the product, the other countries will naturally accept it?
I think for...
Do they still need to go through a process?
You see, because you're always, a regulator will always like to maintain their sovereignty at the end of the day. That's always going to be the case. But also, as you work together for longer, the trust develops and maybe this collaboration process also evolves. But what happens is that the assessment is joint, and countries may then individually decide if they want to or not
register the product. But what we see is that usually all the countries do want to register, but they maintain the right to change. In terms of medical device, it's quite different in the sense, because we're doing very much a recognition recognition of another regulatory decision, reliance on that regulatory decision. We actually have started a small collaboration between South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. And there we've particularly looked at the HIV self-test kit, and already now, because those countries have not put forward their regulations for medical devices, we've tried to harmonize that at this stage so that there is harmonization there, that we can also share assessments and potentially share decisions about approving or rejecting a product.
She deserves a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. That was a presentation by Andrea Jalsin-Cater, who is the Deputy Director at South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, responsible for the regulation of medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. She is also chair of the Pan-African Harmonization Working Group, a body for medical devices regulators in Africa that aim to improve access to safe, quality and performance medical devices. Well, let's give her a hand. I know that there are a lot of questions, and the good thing is that is something we can do during lunchtime. I'll ask you to be upstanding, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so we're just going to spell B with our bodies. 1, 2, 3, B. Oh, there we go. Professor's getting it. Professor, would you like to come and just help us? All right.
Small B or B?
Capital B.
Okay.
It's lunchtime, ladies and gentlemen. Kindly proceed to the deck for lunch. It will be a buffet menu, so please feel free to interact, and just remember that we need to be back very, very shortly at 2 o'clock. Thank you so much for your attention.